Hysteria is an uncontrollable emotion that occurs in a group of people. One of the earliest examples of mass hysteria was the Salem witch trials in 1620. Then in the 1920s and 50s, another mass hysteria emerged, called the Red Scare. It was hysteria over communists working in the U.S. government, the second one escalated by Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy's obsessiveness with finding communists in the American government led to a second Red Scare in the United States, and without his often unsubstantiated investigations and claims, the post-World War II fear of communism, spies, and moral decay most likely would have lessened by the early 1950s. The first Red Scare was not long-lasting, but was what first kicked off the rise of the Communist Party. It began after World War I, lasting from 1917 to 1920. The Bolsheviks, which was a far-left Marxist faction led by Vladimir Lenin, toppled the Romanov dynasty. That began the rise of the Communist Party and caused international fear of the Bolsheviks and anarchists. In the U.S., labor strikes were occurring more frequently, and the press blamed it on immigrants wanting to shatter the way of living in America. The Sedition Act of 1918 targeted those who criticized the government, monitoring radicals and labor union leaders with the threat of deportation. In 1919, anarchist bombings occurred in Boston, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and New York City, turning fear into violence. The bombs targeted law enforcement and government officials. The first Red Scare climaxed in 1919 to 1920 when U.S. Attorney General Alexander Palmer ordered the Palmer Raids. The law enforcement raids specifically targeted leftist radicals and anarchists. Those raids started a time of unrest called the Red Summer. The first Red Scare left many civilians' lives disrupted, but the second Red Scare was much more severe, leaving many more Americans confused and hysterical. The Soviet Union and U.S. rivalry raised concerns in the U.S. that communist leftist sympathizers in the U.S. might work as Soviet spies. The concerns about communism were increased because of a string of events. On March 21, 1947, President Truman issued Executive Order 9835, or the Loyalty Order, which mandated all federal employees to be analyzed to determine whether they were loyal to the government. In 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested a nuclear bomb and China was taken control by communist forces, led by Mao Zedong. The political climate became even more controversial when the Red Scare intensified. The House of Representatives made a large effort to investigate communist activities. The House Un-American Activities Committee was formed in 1938 for that purpose. HUAC's investigations focused on exposing communists working inside the federal government or subversive elements working in the film industry. The second Red Scare would have most likely died down as quickly as the first one if it weren't for Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy and McCarthyism took hold of the U.S. government and its citizens for 4 years, using intimidation to gain power and become a feared figure in U.S. politics. The term McCarthyism is now used as a byname for defamation of character or reputation by means of largely publicized indiscriminate allegations, especially on the basis of unsubstantiated charges. In his fourth year in the Senate, McCarthy gave a speech in West Virginia in 1950 that brought attention to himself and sparked a hysteria of subversives called the Wheeling Speech. He spoke at the Ohio County Women's Republican Club and claimed he had the names of 205 known members of the Communist Party working in the State Department. Over time, the number of names shifted from 205 to 57 to 81, and no one ever saw the list. McCarthy spent around 5 years trying to expose communist and left-wing loyalty risks in the U.S. government. While he never located any communists, his wild claims did provide an explanation for the falling of China and the detonation of the Soviet device, and the position of power he was in enabled him to lengthen how long the Red Scare lasted. McCarthy used his power to level charges of disloyalty towards anyone who disagreed with his views, which cost many victims their reputations and jobs. Anti-McCarthyites referred to the congressional investigations as witch hunts. McCarthy's downfall began when he attacked the Army in 1954, charging them for lax security. The Army responded by charging McCarthy with using improper influence to win preferential treatment from former staff member Private G. David Schein. The Army then hired lawyer Joseph Welch to make it a case. The hearings were televised and known as the Army McCarthy hearings. Welch was charged by McCarthy that one of his attorneys had ties to a communist organization in 1954. Welch responded with the words that would end McCarthy's career. Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness. Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You have done enough. Have you no sense of decency? Overnight, McCarthy lost a vast amount of his support and popularity. In the end, McCarthy kept his job but lost his power. He died in 1957 at age 48 of hepatitis. Although McCarthy's reign of power died in about one night, he ruined many citizens' lives and caused lots of disruption throughout the country. The fear after World War II of communism, spies, and moral decay would not have lasted so long without Joseph McCarthy's obsessiveness with using unsubstantiated investigations and claims to find communists in the American government. In the more recent years, McCarthy's destructive behavior was mimicked by Trump. Similar to Welch asking McCarthy to stop harassing people, a Georgia official became angry with Trump for his baseless fraud claims. The official's final straw was a young man's life threatened by Trump supporters for doing his job. The official begged Trump to stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Though both Trump and McCarthy are no longer in power, access to social media allows many more McCarthys to speak their mind, allowing McCarthy's legacy to remain.